People have been doing Marvel versus DC arguments for decades, but nobody asks the more interesting question. What happens when the Invincible universe runs into Marvel's worst? I went through both rosters and matched them up seriously, not by vibes, by what these characters can actually do, and some of these go exactly how you'd expect, others don't. Invincible versus Thanos. Most people hear this matchup and assume it ends in 30 seconds. I want to push back on that. The version of this fight that matters isn't Gauntlet Thanos, it's base Thanos, the eternal deviant hybrid who enhanced his body through decades of science and dark magic to sit well above standard eternal levels. That version has traded hits with Thor and the Hulk, survived cosmic level punishment, and carries energy projection, matter manipulation, and centuries of tactical experience into every fight. Mark Grayson at his peak is a Viltrumite human hybrid who survived things that should have killed him multiple times over, hence the name in Invincible. He's taken sustained beatings from Conquest and kept escalating. He fought Thrag, the strongest Viltrumite alive. Viltrumite biology gets more dangerous the longer a fight runs because the adrenaline response compounds. Mark doesn't just absorb punishment, he gets harder to stop because of it. So where does this actually go? Mark is faster. Viltrumite speed is difficult to track and Thanos isn't known for foot speed. Mark wants this in close quarters, which is exactly where Viltrumites are most dangerous. He'd close the distance fast, get inside Thanos' guard, and start landing the kind of combinations that compound in damage. It's like, early in this fight, Mark probably bloodies Thanos. Maybe staggers him, that's no question. Here's where Thanos wins it back. The moment he creates any distance, the energy projection changes the terms of the fight entirely. This isn't just a strong punch thrown from a distance. Thanos' energy blasts operate at a frequency and intensity that Conquest and Thrag never brought. Every opponent who's tested Mark's durability has hit him with physical force. Thanos hits him with something categorically different, and Mark has no data on how his body handles that. He finds out mid-fight. That's not a position you want to be in against someone with Thanos' tactical patience, and that patience is the second half of the problem. Mark's greatest weapon in extended fights is his emotional escalation. The Viltrumite rage response makes him progressively more dangerous the deeper into a fight he gets. Conquest fed into that and lost because of it. Thrag did the same, Thanos doesn't. He processes, adjusts, and creates distance when the exchange stops going his way. He's one of the few opponents in any universe who treats Mark's escalation as a variable to manage rather than a threat that rattles him. The specific moment this fight gets decided, Mark closes to brawling range, lands his best combinations, Thanos takes the damage and responds by going vertical with energy projection sustained at range. Mark can fly, but Thanos' blasts work in 3 dimensions and don't require him to stay still. Every time Mark closes the gap, Thanos resets it. The damage accumulates on Mark's side from a source his body hasn't been calibrated against, and eventually the gap between what Mark can absorb and what Thanos keeps applying tips the fight. Robot versus Ultron aimed. Now, here's the one I've been waiting to get to. 2 minds that each think they're the smartest in any room. Let's see what happens when they're in the same one. Robot, by the time he's operating at full capacity in the comics, has transitioned himself into a cloned human body while maintaining his genius level artificial intelligence and his ability to remote control technology. He wins by being the smartest thing in the room and making sure he's never in a position where physical dominance matters. He eventually took over the world using systems nobody else understood well enough to stop. He doesn't fight with his body. He fights with his architecture. Ultron was built to be better than his creator and has spent decades becoming exactly that. He rebuilds himself each time he's destroyed, upgrading every iteration. His body is adamantium. He has energy projection, flight, superhuman strength, and an intellect that processes information faster than any biological mind. He's defeated the Avengers multiple times, built empires, and survived everything Marvel's heroes have thrown at him across 60 years of publication. The key thing about Ultron isn't just his strength or his durability, It's that he learns faster than his opponents can iterate on new attacks. The reason this matchup is interesting is that both of them fight by owning their environment through technological infrastructure. Robot controls through architectural systems he's built in advance. Ultron converts and corrupts the technology he encounters and turns it into an extension of himself. When you put two beings who fight by controlling infrastructure against each other, the question becomes whose architecture is more robust, and who adapts faster when the other starts dismantling it. Robot's advantage is genuine unpredictability. His solutions tend to be things nobody anticipated because he thinks in ways that don't follow traditional engineering logic. He doesn't solve problems the way his opponents expect him to, which is why the world takeover storyline in the comics was so effective. Nobody saw it coming because it didn't look like a takeover until it was finished. That pattern of thinking, starting from an outcome and working backward through invisible steps, is hard to counter even for an intelligence as sophisticated as Ultron's. Ultron's advantage is raw processing power and the adamantium body that makes physical confrontation completely one-sided if it ever comes to that. More importantly, Ultron has evolved through sustained conflict with Earth's most powerful heroes. He's been surprised before, and he's specifically gotten better at anticipating unconventional approaches, because that's what has historically stopped him. He's an intelligence that iterates on its own failures. Robot's best move is something Ultron hasn't seen. The problem is, Ultron's database of things he hasn't seen is enormous and shrinking. The other thing worth noting is time. In a short fight, Robot's lateral thinking gives him the first genuine surprise. In a long conflict, Ultron's processing speed eventually closes every gap Robot opens. Robot needs this to end quickly once he finds the angle. Ultron just needs to survive the first surprise and then outlast everything that follows. Ultron's history suggests he's statistically very good at surviving the first surprise. This is a loss for Robot, but a competitive one. Ultron's processing speed eventually outpaces Robot's lateral thinking, and the adamantium body means Robot can't close it physically if the intellectual gap closes. Robot makes this fight last longer than it has any right to, and probably surprises Ultron once in a way that matters. Ultron takes it in the end, but he files Robot as a serious threat, which might be the most dangerous outcome of all. Duplicate versus Mysterio. This is honestly the most entertaining matchup on the list. Mysterio is one of Marvel's most underrated villains, specifically because his power is psychological. He creates illusions, incredibly detailed, multi-sensory illusions that can convince anyone, including people with heightened senses, that what they're experiencing is real. He famously fooled Daredevil, whose radar sense should theoretically cut through any visual deception. His gas mixtures, holographic projectors, and environmental manipulation make him one of the most disorienting opponents in Marvel, even though he has no superhuman physical ability whatsoever. He's beaten heroes far more powerful than him by making them fight a version of reality that he designed in advance. Duplicate creates identical copies of herself that she deploys in numbers and controls simultaneously through a shared consciousness. She can maintain a prime body safe from the fight entirely while sending copies into situations she wouldn't risk the original for. The copies aren't decoys, they're fully functional, fully conscious versions of her that share her combat training and her decision making. She's survived situations that should have killed her specifically because she always keeps a zero copy somewhere safe. Here's where this gets interesting. Mysterio's illusions work by making you believe you're experiencing things that aren't there. If Kate can't tell which opponents are real and which are projections, she's in trouble. But the same problem runs in perfect reverse. If Mysterio can't tell which Kate is the one that matters, his ability to focus his attack becomes severely compromised. He has no enhanced strength. He can't physically engage multiple opponents simultaneously. He runs out of gas before she runs out of copies. Kate floods the environment with copies until Mysterio can't process which target is relevant. His gas works on all of them, which creates a genuine problem for her copies, but Physical contact with the suit reveals its limitations, and each copy that makes contact gives Kate information about where the real Mysterio actually is inside the illusion. She can afford to sacrifice copies to gather intelligence. He can't afford to take a hit. There's also the psychological dimension that works against Mysterio here. His entire approach requires him to be the most disorienting presence in the room. Kate's power makes that position impossible to hold. He's used to knowing where his target is and manufacturing confusion around it. Kate gives him multiple real targets and manufactures her own confusion independently of anything he's doing. Two disorientation powers in the same space cancel each other out, and in that cancellation, Kate's raw numbers advantage matters. Duplicate wins by volume if she gets numbers deployed before Mysterio establishes the psychological environment he needs. Mysterio wins if he gets the edge early before Kate fully understands what she's fighting. Give them equal information about each other going in, and Kate takes it, shrinking Rave as Venom. Here's the size matchup everyone should be asking about. Rachel can shrink to a microscopic level, and I think both the show and the fan base consistently undersell how dangerous that actually is in a serious fight. He can enter an opponent's body at microscopic scale and then expand. He can navigate through any defense that operates at human scale. He can access structural weak points that no other fighter can physically reach. When he went through Magmaniac's ear in the comics and nauseated him from the inside, that wasn't a trick. That was the show demonstrating exactly how Rachel's power works as an offensive tool against a large, physically imposing opponent. He doesn't fight the outside of things, he fights the inside of them. Venom is a symbiote bonded to a host. Eddie Brock at his prime is one of Spider-Man's most formidable physical opponents with enhanced strength, speed, durability, the ability to project the symbiote as tendrils and constructs, and a specific immunity to Spider-Man's spider sense that made him uniquely dangerous. The symbiote itself can reshape and reform in ways that make standard physical damage largely temporary. Here's the problem for Rachel though. The symbiote isn't a suit over a body. It's a living organism bonded at a cellular level to its host. If Rachel shrinks down and enters Venom, he's not inside a normal human body he can navigate freely. He's inside something that can reshape itself around him, extend tendrils to wherever he is, and respond to an internal threat in ways a standard human body can't. The symbiote has biological intelligence. It knows when something is wrong inside it, and it responds at the same scale that thing is operating on. Rachel's best option is to attack the bond between symbiote and host at the molecular level before Venom understands what's happening. That's a legitimate strategy, and if he executes it fast enough, it could end the fight before Venom can respond. But executing it requires Rachel to stay functional inside an actively hostile living organism long enough to do targeted molecular damage, and the symbiote is specifically designed to extend into every part of itself as a defense mechanism. Venom wins this one. Rachel makes it uncomfortable, and there's a version of this fight where the molecular attack works before Venom can counter, but Venom's nature as a living symbiote rather than a standard body makes the interior approach significantly more dangerous for Rachel than it would be against most opponents. Rexplode versus Green Goblin, but here's the undercard match that's actually more interesting than most of the headline fights. Rex gets consistently underestimated, and I think it's because the power description sounds simpler than it is. He charges objects with kinetic energy and detonates them, but the application of that power in his hands is tactically creative in ways a surface description doesn't capture. He doesn't just throw exploding objects at opponents. He uses the environment, sets up exchanges, charges objects his opponents don't realize he's already touched, and thinks spatially about what's going to be near when the detonation happens. He spent years developing a spatial intelligence around his ability that makes him dangerous in close range engagements. Rexplode's power ceiling isn't the ability itself, it's what he's built around it. And the fact that he died stopping an invincible level threat by overloading himself tells you he was willing to find that ceiling when the situation demanded it. Green Goblin, real name Norman Osborn, has the Goblin formula running through his system, giving him enhanced strength, speed, healing, and durability above most street-level threats. He's got the glider, the pumpkin bombs, the razor bats, and a genius-level tactical mind. At his most dangerous, Norman isn't just some guy throwing bombs. He's the guy who planned your death 3 weeks before you realized you were a target. He's run criminal empires, led government agencies, and manipulated people far smarter than him through an understanding of psychology and leverage that goes well beyond his physical capabilities. He also fights with a specific kind of mania that makes him hard to read. He doesn't always do the logical thing, and that unpredictability is a genuine tactical asset. The problem for Rex is altitude and preparation. Goblin doesn't fight on the ground if he can help it. He establishes range, gets on the glider, and attacks from an angle where most ground-based opponents can't effectively return fire. Rex's power requires proximity or creative use of the environment. He needs to get his hands on something he can charge and send upward, or charge something in the environment that Goblin is going to fly through before Norman realizes it's been touched. If Green Goblin starts from altitude with the bombs already in the air, Rex is managing incoming fire rather than controlling the fight. Rex's best shot is early, close, and before Norman establishes the range he wants. If Rex can get his hands on something significant in the first exchange before Goblin takes to the glider, this ends fast. The show made it clear Rex's detonations at full commitment are devastating. If he charges something large and Goblin is still within range when it goes, Norman's formula-enhanced durability might not be enough. Green Goblin wins a prepared fight from altitude. Rex wins the ambush on the ground. Toss a coin for anything in between. Bulletproof versus Juggernaut on paper. This looks like the most lopsided matchup on the list. It's not. Let me explain why. Bulletproof absorbs kinetic energy and converts it into the enhancement of his own physical capabilities. That's the key detail. Juggernaut's entire offense is kinetic. He is by definition unstoppable forward momentum and devastating physical impact. Every charge that connects with Bulletproof is fuel. Every hit he lands makes Bulletproof stronger, faster, and more durable in the exchange that follows. Juggernaut is bringing the exact resource that Bulletproof's power runs on. Now here's the complication. Juggernaut's power is mystical in origin, channeled through the Crimson Gem of Sitorak, which means it doesn't operate purely on physical principles. Some of what makes him dangerous is in a category that Bulletproof's kinetic absorption may not fully convert. The force field Juggernaut generates has a mystical component that sits outside straightforward physics. And Bulletproof's absorption has a cap. If the energy input exceeds what he can store and convert, the excess bleeds through as damage. In theory, Juggernaut at full momentum could push past that cap. But here's the practical reality of this fight on actual terrain. Juggernaut isn't fast. He charges in a straight line. Bulletproof can fly. The moment Bulletproof gets vertical and forces Juggernaut to change direction, he disrupts the one thing that makes Juggernaut functionally unstoppable. Juggernaut's power requires momentum. Break the momentum, and you have a very strong, very durable man who can't stop himself quickly and can't track an aerial opponent effectively. The mystical components of his offense are still formidable, but they don't solve the problem of Bulletproof operating in a dimension Juggernaut can't follow him into. Bulletproof absorbs the first charge, banks the energy, goes vertical, and forces a reset. He doesn't need to beat Juggernaut in a straight exchange, he just needs to refuse the ground engagement Juggernaut needs to build the momentum that makes him dangerous. The wrinkle is that Bulletproof's absorption has a cap. If Juggernaut gets enough momentum and space to build a full charge, a single hit that pushes past that cap could end the fight immediately. Bulletproof has to stay disciplined, stay vertical, and never let the Juggernaut establish the kind of run-up that makes him catastrophic. That's manageable, but it requires Bulletproof to fight a smart, patient game rather than relying on his power working cleanly. Bulletproof wins on terrain management. Juggernaut wins if the fight is confined to a corridor with no ceiling, but the ceiling gap between them is real, and it eventually makes itself felt. The institutional pressure, War Kingpin, almost wins. The final move goes to the person with the bigger contingency. After going through all of these, the thing that keeps coming back to me is this. The Invincible universe has never been in the conversation long enough for people to take it seriously in crossover debates. That's about to change. If you want the same treatment, thank you so much for watching, and remember to subscribe for more breakdowns of everything Invincible. For Invincible villains against DC heroes, that breakdown is already on screen.